We'll begin with the opening verse that's in the chat. The profound and wondrous Dharma is rarely encountered, even in 100 million kalpas. Having it to hear, accept, and maintain, may I taste the truth of the Tathagata's words.
Welcome to everyone. It's so nice to see people. And a special welcome to anyone who is here for the first time, or if you've been away and returning. And I'm Sessei Meg Levie. And I'm wondering if we could just take a moment, as sometimes I like us to do, and unmute and just say hello, put it in gallery view. 1, 2, 3. Hello.
Oh.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, so take a second and just see the faces on the screen and feel how we are in the Zendo right now. This is our Zendo. We're making it across time and space. So wherever you are, feeling yourself there, and also expanding in a very real way to feel each other's presence. That we really are right here together. Now, if you haven't yet, if you could remute yourself, just so for sound quality. Fully landing. And what I wanted to share today is, as many of you know, last week was the passing of the great Vietnamese Zen master, Thich Nhat Hanh. And he had had a stroke several years ago and apparently couldn't speak or walk, but still could communicate quite vividly. And so he passed away at the age of 95 back in Vietnam. And I've been moved by all of the tributes and how many lives his simple but very powerful presence touched. And it made me think of a story of a friend of mine that I wanted to share. And my friend named Mario, and I asked Mario if it was okay to share this story, and he said yes, it was. So Mario grew up in Spain, and from a very early age, he wanted to understand how the human mind worked. This was his driving question as a young person. And he decided that to find this out, he needed to become a doctor. So he went and he got a medical degree and became an MD in Spain. But as he was doing this, he started to think, the doctors, that's not enough. I really need to be a neuroscientist. So still in Spain, then he went and he got a doctorate in neuroscience. And then he thought, I actually don't think the neuroscientists are going to figure this out. And he said, well, maybe there's another way. Maybe it's through the power of storytelling, the human capacity for art and creativity. So even though he was in Stanford, he was running a neuroscience research lab at Stanford, he left that completely. And he went and he got an MFA in filmmaking. And so he became a filmmaker. And he was hired by Google to do videos for Google. So he was doing that for a number of years, still trying to understand the human mind. And then one day, Thich Nhat Hanh came for a day of practice at Google. He had never heard of Thich Nhat Hanh, but his desk was near the large auditorium where he was speaking. And as he passed by, he stopped and he started listening to this Zen master speaking and feeling his presence. And he thought, this person understands more about the mind, the human mind, than anything I've encountered so far. And so then he became interested in meditation, interested in mindfulness. Eventually, he became a teacher for the Search Inside Yourself program that I was part of, and ended up managing that program at Google for a number of years. And because of my association with that program, I was able to actually be at Google the next time that Thich Nhat Hanh came. So I had the privilege to spend that full day there. And I remember how moved I was at it was such a change of pace for all of these people, maybe a couple of hundred people at least, to take a full day out at a very busy major company and simply be with themselves and each other. And he was there with a number of his monks and nuns and community. But one thing I really remember is he invited people to do mindful walking. And so he stood up, and everyone quietly stood up and very, very slowly started walking outside. And this mass of people, full of patience and willingness and silence, very, very slowly walked outside. And he found an open space, and then he very consciously sat down. And this whole mass of people very consciously and slowly sat down. And there we were. And he didn't say very much, maybe a few words, but mostly it was just being there with ourselves and each other and him and the world around us in a totally, for many people, different way. And then he got up, walked slowly back. Everyone walked slowly back. And then there was a mindful lunch. So people had brought their lunches, and all of this mass of people simply sitting together, very quietly enjoying their food. And then in the afternoon, he stepped away. And the afternoon was run by Sister Chun Kong, who as a young woman was working in the slums and encountered Thich Nhat Hanh, or as his students call him, Thai, and joined him. And she became his primary collaborator for over 60 years, and eventually also ordained and is a teacher herself. And so in this afternoon session, at Google, basically instead of having us do a practice session where we had to set up and really concentrate and focus on our breath or more discussion, she invited us to relax. And I think if there had been room to lie down, she would have invited all of us to lie down. But as it was, we just had chairs. So we kind of literally just sort of slouched back. And she invited us to fully relax, to let our mind wander, to feel the body, to soften. And basically, she sang us a lullaby. And I was it felt just so kind and so human. and a lot like nap time at kindergarten, which I didn't know I was missing so much. And we all just softened and listened to her sing this lullaby. The sense of permission to rest, to restore. Just being this human animal with its own rhythms. And then eventually she brought us out of it. We all felt refreshed. And Tai returned, and we continued the discussion. And this one simple experience actually touched me and influenced me. That I started paying more attention to circadian rhythms of the human body. That it's actually very natural for us around 2 p.m. usually to feel an energy dip. You may have experienced this yourself. And usually we're like, how do you power through it? Or if you're leading a workshop, how do you get everybody energized after lunch? And realizing, well, maybe there's another way. Maybe there's a very deep wisdom in siestas. That it's okay to let ourselves have a rest time if that's what we need. And since then, I will actually go to some lengths to not schedule anything at 2 p.m. because I realize that I'm not at my best. It's much harder. And I'm much fresher in the mornings or later in the afternoons. So if at all possible, I just give myself that time. And if I need to take a nap, I do. It feels much kinder. And in a way, this is personal, our individual human choices. But I think there's something here too about listening to bigger rhythms, listening to the rhythms of the natural world, listening to the cycles of the earth. We have a strong idea we need to accomplish a lot, get things done. And humankind certainly has done that spectacularly. But we're running into problems too. We push ourselves, we push the earth, maybe beyond our natural rhythms. Not leaving that room, that kindness for rest and for recovery. To be able to ask, what's important now? And to be able to listen for that answer. So as I said, I've been familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh's work for some time. But as I started to prepare for this talk, I thought, well, how much do I really know? Aware of his presence, his sayings, his teaching, his books, his calligraphy, his peace activism. But I started reading more about his life and realizing I really can't do it justice, even in summary here, that the scope and influence of this one person's simple practice is really startling. So as a young person, he was a poet. And he also worked to revitalize Buddhism in Vietnam. Like he really wanted to bring it out of being caught too much in tradition and the monasteries and find a way for everyday people to access practice in Vietnam, to understand you can practice in daily life. And then during the Vietnam War, he chose to remain a monk when some were disrobing, feeling like they needed to join the war effort, but at the same time to be engaged in a neutral way to help. And so creating the roots of his own understanding of engaged or implied Buddhism. And he wrote the book, Miracle of Mindfulness. Excuse me. I'm sorry, he wrote to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., to protest the war, and he was extremely influential in King choosing to speak out publicly in that. And as I think is well known, Dr. King nominated him for the Nobel Peace Prize as well. And when he left for the US and what he thought was going to be a short trip, he ended up in exile for 39 years. And he was able to write about practice in a really accessible way, even though he also knew Pali, knew classical Chinese, was rooted in the main text of Buddhism. And he wrote this book, Miracle of Mindfulness, but he didn't write it for Westerners. He actually wrote it for the people who were doing his peace work in Vietnam to help them not burn out. But then it became something that reached a lot of people in the West and ended up getting translated into 30 different languages and became this core text of kind of the mindfulness movement as it developed. And he also coined the word interbeing. And I just learned from the Plum Village website that he actually was at Tassajara Zen Mountain Center in California, where I trained for a number of years when that word came to him. So I was appreciating the interbeing, the interconnection there of practice and of culture. And then around in the 2000s, he started turning that concept, really looking at ecology, the environment, deep ecology. And his books sold, I think, 10 million copies worldwide. And before I go forward, I just want to, if I can, just to make it a little bit more real, I just want to share a photo. Noticing how you feel. What is it about his presence? The way he holds the bell, the way he invites the bell. That is so simple, but so powerful. Just noticing how you feel as you take in this picture. And now returning. And the day before he passed, I had downloaded from the library what I think was his last book, which is Zen and the Art of Saving the Planet. And then I read in the New York Times front page breaking news that he had passed. And that night, I woke up in the middle of the night and I thought, I want to read that book. And so I got up like 3 a.m. and I started reading. And there's a lot there, and I haven't gotten all the way through it, but some things really touched me and I wanted to offer them to you. One thing he said from that book is, when you wake up and you see that the earth is not just the environment, the earth is us. You touch the nature of interbeing. And at that moment, you can have real communication with the earth. We have to wake up together. And if we wake up together, we have a chance. So I'm going to say that again and see if it can be real. Right. So when you wake up, when we wake up, And you see that the earth is not just the environment. So think about the earth for a moment in your yard, if you have one, what's around you, the oceans, the environment, except it's not just the environment. The earth is us. All of that is you. You touch the nature of interbeing. And I think about when I lived at Green Gulch Farm Zen Center, and on one Sunday a month, there was a kids program. And the kids would come and they would sit up front for the first 10 minutes in the Zendo. But then people would take them outside and they would go to the farm, because it's very easy when you're with the earth and you're planting things and doing compost and seeing it all to understand interbeing. We're not separate. And he says, at that moment, you can have real communication with the earth. So I'd like to invite you to think of for yourself the time in your life, maybe when you were a child, where you felt you had real communication with the earth. It wasn't something abstract or separate, but you felt something. Something touched you. Connection, a true belonging. And if we wake up together, he says, then we have a chance. So I think there's a waking up together as human beings, but actually I think he means something more. I think there's all of life waking up together. You know, of course, the great Zen master Dogen, I think, points to this too. It's bigger than we, I think, can fully comprehend, this interbeing. He's also very clear that, you know, the one thing we really have the power to change, to work with, is our mind. So much comes out of choices, perceptions, understandings. And if we shift that, we shift our perspective, shift our understanding, what is possible? So as I was sitting there in the middle of the night, reading this book, you know, for a while I've had the thought, you know, as we open to where we are with the earth, the different challenges, what's happening, I thought, there's something particular that Buddhist practice, that Zen practice has to offer here. That Buddhism has been exploring this question of interbeing for a very long time. And there are practices to open us to this. And as I started reading in the middle of the night, and there's something, you know, I don't necessarily recommend you wake up in the middle of the night and start reading, but there's also a reason that sometimes in monasteries, people get up very early in the morning, that there's an openness. It's kind of a liminal time. Sometimes things can go in the middle of the night that we might filter out during the day. So I think I was in a very open state. And as I was reading this, something went in. That this idea that I had been saying, oh, this is important, there's something here, I want to explore it. Suddenly like, oh, wow, this person has really, really deeply understands this and is finding a way to articulate it. And I was so moved. Wow. And he goes straight, and you know, even though he can speak, has written so many books that are very simple, very accessible, and the power of that. This book really starts by going to a very core traditional Buddhist text, which is the Diamond Sutra, which was written between the 2nd and 5th centuries. And the section that where he starts to go into this is actually called Radical Insight, a New Way of Seeing. And this book was a New York Times bestseller. Right? So this is not esoteric in the monastery. This is actually getting out there. And the person who co-wrote it with him, Sister True Dedication, in her section right before he goes into this more deeply, she says, you know, you might actually want to be sitting down for this. Are you relaxed? Are you open? This is gonna challenge our normal ways of thinking about ourselves in the world. To soften, to let this possibility in. And he talks, though, his interpretation of this is he talks about to see in this new way 4 things we need to throw away, as he says, let go of. And I will just touch on them here. But one is the notion of self, which is so natural for us to perceive ourselves as separate, as independent, as permanent beings. But this was one of the Buddha's core insights, that there is no such thing as an independent, permanent self. And through practice, we can see through that we arise according to all kinds of causes and conditions, our parents, culture, the earth. And there's not an actual doer. He gives the analogy of it rains, but there's no rainer. There's no one making the rain, but there is rain. There's activity. There's a continuity. There's our life. But there's not a core thing that's me, that's unchanging. He says it's more correct to say, I inter-am, or we inter-are. And then he says we need to throw away this notion even of a human being. Right? We tend to also project that to think, okay, humans are over here and everything else is over there. Humans are here, the earth is over there. Okay? But realizing humans evolved in this ecological web. We're made up of all kinds of different elements. We depend on our environment. There's no separate thing called a human being. And he says, we are human beings, but at the same time, we are everything. Seeing this, we know that to preserve other species is to preserve ourselves. This is interbeing, the deepest teaching of deep ecology. And then also the notion of even living beings. We think they're living beings and then there's non-living beings. But if you think about your own being right now, this body, mind, that's you, realizing if you really think about it, what are the elements in your own body? Right? We're made up of the same stuff as earth. The air that you breathe is the same air circulating about with all beings. The oxygen from the trees, we're part of that cycle. If you think about the water in your body, the coffee you drank this morning maybe, where did that come from? It's part of the rains, it's part of the ocean, part of the rivers. We're part of that cycle. And the energy in our body coming through plants, the energy of the sun, the food that we eat. And I remember sometimes it's easier to see this than other times. That when I lived at Tassajara, which is the monastery that's deep, deep in the mountains east of Big Sur. And it's a really small, very narrow valley surrounded by very steep mountains. And to live for literally years at a time in this very small area, of course, surrounded by vastness of wilderness, but this very small area where every rock becomes deeply familiar. And the sound of the creek is always there. There's a way that after time, I really felt like the place was my body. And when I go back now, something in me resonates with that. There was no separation. And I remember when I left there after spending some time, extended period of time there, it was actually kind of hard. It was hard. I remember being in an airport. It was kind of painful to be in such a sterile environment because my body, my senses had totally opened to that connection, to that truth of interbeing, which is always there. And with this, we can start to see Earth not as inert matter, but as a sacred reality that we're part of. And then finally, the fourth is throwing away the notion of even a lifespan. You know, we have a story, I'm born at point A, I die at point B. But he's saying, well, that's only one way to talk about it. There's a way our ancestors are living through us, a way we're passing on through those who come next. And in a way, our full lifespan may just be in this one breath, this present moment. And he says the insight of interbeing will help you feel much more at ease with yourself. Removing wrong views, throwing them away, and breaking into the heart of reality are the tasks of a meditator. Is that how we usually think about our meditation? I don't know. It's interesting. Again, he says, removing wrong views, so opening, not this separate, independent self I have to protect, but we're part of this vast interbeing. So removing wrong views, throwing them away, and breaking into the heart of reality are the tasks of the meditator. This is a radical shift in seeing. He says, if you're still caught in these views, you're not free. But if you have insight to see through them, we'll have the energy we need to meet what arises. And I also remember at Tassajara, we had special sutra books for the Diamond Sutra. It's a long, fairly long sutra, so it wasn't part of the regular chant rotation, but occasionally we would take these out and over many days, just keep cycling through the Diamond Sutra. And the point, as I remember it, the point that stayed with me was it's saying, a bodhisattva, so someone who's devoted to the awakening, to the liberation of all beings. Like a bodhisattva is devoted to liberating all beings, waking up with all beings. But if a bodhisattva actually thinks there are beings to save, to liberate, to wake up with, then they're off. Totally devoted to the earth, totally devoted, save the rainforest. But if we think there is an earth separate from us, if we think there is a rainforest separate from us, we are off. How does that shift things to open to this? So this is the great paradox, not two, not one. We need to be able to talk about the earth. We need to be able to talk about each other individually. We need to talk about the rainforest. But we also need to understand That's just a way of talking. And, if this is truly the task of a meditator, how do we do that? And I found it helpful to think about what's sometimes called 3 levels of wisdom. And the first is to hear the teaching, read books, listen to Dharma talks, take it in, hear the teaching. And the second level is to think about it. Is this right? Does this fit with my experience? What about this? To turn it over, examine, is this true? Is this useful? And then the third, to let that go and to sit with it, to allow a deeper understanding to arise. That this is not just an intellectual exercise. And that meditation gives us the silence and the space to allow this, to allow this deep listening and this deep hearing. So we're seeing, trusting in this deep interconnection, interbeing. As the great ecological thinker and activist Joanna Macy says, we are part of a net from which we cannot fall. This interwoven interbeing, we cannot fall. That this also is the heart of wisdom, prajnaparamita. And from there, no fear. So on a deep fundamental level, not having fear. And when we're grounded in this understanding, we can listen to the suffering. Perhaps a helpful fear arises as something's wrong, I need to do something. But we meet that from a base of no fear. So from the place of no fear, we can open and feel our fear. From the place of no separation, we can acknowledge and heal our separation. Not two, not one. And I'm going to close with a longer quotation from Thich Nhat Hanh's book. And I'd like to invite you to just let the words seep into you like a gentle rain, like poetry. Many of us are barely awake. We're living in the world, but we can't really see it. It's as though we are sleepwalking. To wake up, first of all, is to wake up to the beauty of the earth. You wake up to the fact that you have a body and that your body is made of the earth and sun and stars. You wake up to the fact that the sky is beautiful and that our planet is a jewel of the cosmos. You have the opportunity to be a child of the earth and to make steps on this extraordinary planet. Second, to wake up means to wake up to the suffering in the world. You wake up to the fact that the earth is in danger and living species are in danger. You want to find ways to bring relief, healing, and transformation. This requires a tremendous source of energy. If you have a strong desire in you, a mind of love, that is the kind of energy that will help you do these two things. Wake up to the beauty of the planet to heal yourself and wake up to the suffering of the world and try to help. If you have that source of strength in you, if you have that mind of love, you are what can be called a Buddha in action. So, waking up to the beauty of the planet, we heal ourselves. Waking up to the suffering of the world, we open our heart to love. And then finally, Thich Nhat Hanh said, the cream of his teaching, the shortest teaching I could give, he said, is simply this: I have arrived. I am home. Thank you very much. And I invite us all, we'll have a chance to speak together. But before we do that, just a moment to stop and resettle into yourself, maybe take a breath. If you need to move at all, an invitation to do that. So again, seeing each other on the screen, feeling ourselves here. And noticing if there's anything from that exploration that touched you or landed with you or was challenging or curious. And there's anything we'd like to say. And I see Richard raising his hand.
He's raising his hand. He needs a very fundamental answer to something that, oops. He's raising his hand. He needs a very fundamental answer to your talk. Are you saying interbeing with a B or with a V?
Being, B as in boy, E-I-N-G.
E-I-N-G.
Okay.
E-I-N-G. Which is a little different from interconnection. I mean, none of the language is perfect, right? But there's some sense of interconnection that maybe has a feeling of there's this and this and this and this, and it's all interconnected, which is true. But interbeing is even a little deeper than that. It's not just separate things that are connected. So using that word interbeing versus interconnection.
Well, intervening sounded like we kept trying to wonder why intervening in something would
Intervening.
be like V as in victory, you know.
Bah. Thanks for clarifying that. Other thoughts anyone would like to share? I see Laura. Welcome, Laura.
Hi, thank you, Mike.
Yeah.
Yes, I want to share what I'm about to share in celebration of interbeing. I hope I can get to the end. So today, after a long time, I took a nap. On the hammock outside, and after a couple of hours I was reading, and this week during my meditation, Thich Nhat Hanh's faith kept coming to my mind. Especially there was this picture of like it was together with something I had read and watched about him. When he decided to do something about the Vietnam War. And this look kept coming to my mind. And so today, after the nap, and as I was reading, I stopped and I felt different. And I also want to say that I had spent the morning listening to the lake. So I've been deeply touched by Thich Nhat Hanh my entire life, and especially this week. And then I paused and I wrote that today, for the first time in my life, in 40 years, I am not afraid. And I meant that I understood that touching the suffering was the essence of everything. And so it's not the first time, Mag, that you do that. But this all really touched me even more because it confirms the power of interbeing. It's not by chance I'm here. It's not by chance we're here. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
That's beautiful. I'm so happy. Maybe it all comes from a nap. I don't know.
Yeah.
For sharing. Wonderful. Let's see the closest. Okay. Anyone else care to speak? I see Mary. I think you need to unmute, Mary. So Mary, I think you're muted. Can you unmute? Yeah. There we go.
There we are.
Hi.
I was at Kasahara twice, and I can remember when the truck pulled out of the driveway for the second time, thinking, what is it I really take with me? All my belongings were in the back of that truck. And I don't know that I have really answered that yet. After all these years. Thank you.
Thank you. Other thoughts, sharings?
Hey, Meg, thank you for your talk.
Hi, Thomas.
I was particularly, I read some of this morning's newspaper and a series of 4 or 5 really kind of depressing articles, on various situations and in the world, and then went online and read the local paper about situations locally that are controversial, and even in Sebastopol, the RV village, which is proposed on Highway 116, and I was really struck by your comments about getting up at 3 a.m. and reading Thich Nhat Hanh's book and the spirit of generosity and charity, and also feeling, with the polarity that exists, there's, I think, part of myself, my ego feels anger and how could you, and at some of these controversies, and yet thinking about Thich Nhat Hanh's presence and his teachings, the only way we can respond, I think, is with love. And just want to make that comment.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Thomas. And what in the context of what you're sharing and imagining, feeling that, and also the background of Thich Nhat Hanh, coming into presence through very difficult situations in Vietnam and the world, that it's very clear that that kind of love is not just sort of smoothing over kind of love. There's a real power in that kind of love, and it sometimes isn't so easy. But I think there's nothing else to do. So thank you.
Thank you.
I see Roberta down there. Yes.
Thank you, Meg, so much. I really resonated with your speaking about Thich Nhat Hanh. I worked for Parallax Press some years ago, and it was sort of a challenging job for me. It was a computer data entry job, and it was tiny, and I have a learning disability, and it was a tiny font that I had to put in tiny little squares for people's addresses and various things. And I remember I had to really stand up for myself with the person training me. And that was one of the most amazing things for me in terms of realizing we are all interconnected, yes. And that I want to do this job well, and I need your help. I had this beautiful joy each time I would leave Albany on the bus to go back home in Oakland. And it would permeate me, this sense of joy. And I had walked with Thich Nhat Hanh a few times and been in, seeing him at Spirit Rock and Lake Merritt. And I was just drawn to work for this press because he was so extraordinary. And I got this amazing gift that I didn't expect, which was just to feel this joy. And each morning we would have, before beginning work, a meditation circle and the bell. And it was just a beautiful experience. I just want to say that. And I'll never forget, where did that joy come from? It's still there for me. And yeah, beautiful, beautiful gift to us on this Mother Earth. Thank you so much.
Thank you for sharing that. I recalled actually a Buddhist friend of mine on hearing of his passing says, sometimes teachers are actually more powerful after death. That there's a way this conversation that's being inspired continues to live on.
Yeah.
So I think we're close to time, unless there's someone else who would like to. I see Holly. Yes.
Hey, Meg.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, it was a beautiful talk that you gave, and and I love the way that you talked about connecting, interbeing with the earth, and the beauty of Tassajara and everything. And it brought me back to the idea that all of us here are really pretty privileged to be able to even think about interacting that way, and to be able to have the time to do that. What Tomas was saying about in the paper this morning, there's a major article about a family living in Santa Rosa on Mendocino Avenue in these really crappy old motel rooms and there's a photo of a little girl who's 4 who's trying to look out this window, and the wall is like covered with mold. Those people don't even have time to think about interacting. And it just brings me back to the idea of how privileged we are. And that we can sit here on a Sunday morning and think about these things. And I feel like one of our tasks is to be able to put our privilege to work for other people. And I hope we can keep that in mind.
Thank you for sharing that. And it is so important that it is in the human life. You think of all the capacities throughout history of how you might have show up as a human being to be able to connect in this way. And as you said, have the time and have the resources and have the teaching. it's considered to be extremely, extremely rare. So, and when we touch in that, we realize, oh, wow, this is the task of the human life. This is our great gift, this opportunity. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And to use that to benefit. Yeah. Before we close, I just wanted to share one more photograph that really struck me, especially in this context of what we've been talking about, and just invite you to see how you feel looking at it. Oops, that's the wrong one. Excuse me. Let's see. Oh, I can't get it. How about that? What does it mean to really walk consciously on the earth together? Just taking this moment, deep appreciation for his life and work and the tremendous gifts that we all have received. And with that, I'll pass it back to Dojin and Corinne.
Meg, I just want to say one really quick thing
Sure.
before we close. I really appreciated your talk like everybody else. And I was also noticing, what was it that really put me in a space that I felt like Thich Nhat Hanh's teachings alive in me. And I think it's the pauses in your talk. And I really, really appreciate that. And your voice also really put me in an experiential space. So thank you.
Thank you. For great Bodhisattva beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are infinite. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless. I vow to realize it.